my name is Jen and this is Bee's House of Plants, where we talk about all things houseplant and home design. Welcome back. I'm so excited for another episode of my series, The Houseplant Alphabet. This is a series where I introduce you to some of my houseplants. We talk about my experience growing them, what conditions they are currently receiving in my home. My usual disclaimer, I'm not a plant expert of any kind. This is not a definitive care guide. This is just going to be my experience. Alright, let's get into it. We are now nearing the second half of the alphabet. Today we're going to be talking about the Hoya Krimson Queen. This is one of the first Hoyas, maybe the very first. I think this is the very first Hoya I ever got. I got this one from Gabriella Plants probably over a year ago at this point, and I think it's given me a lot of experience with growing Hoyas. This is a very, very easy Hoya. Most Hoya carnosas are pretty easy Hoyas, and so if you don't have one yet, this is a great one to start with. So let's start first with soil. I have never repotted this one, so this is in whatever the Gabriella Plants soil mix is, which I believe is 80% peat moss with like 20% perlite, and then they also add in their own slow released fertilizers. It's definitely been more than a year since I've had this plant though, so the slow release fertilizer only lasts about 6 months or so, it probably does need a little bit of a rejig, but I wanted to talk about soil because I want to show you what like really dry kind of expended soil looks like. So this plant has not been repotted, so this soil is going to be quite old because remember, you know, it's from when they planted it and not from when I purchased the plant, which probably is like over a year and a half old now. It's very compact, very crumbly, and when I water it, it's very obvious that the soil has become kind of hydrophobic, which means that instead of just like immediately absorbing the water, it kind of just falls immediately through and through the side of the container out. So this means that this plant is due for a repot. I think for me, I will likely transfer it into LECA pretty soon, just because I'm trying to transfer a lot of my collection into LECA. But otherwise, I would just probably, if I were to keep it in soil, I don't think Hoyas are too picky about their soil mixture, so I would use my same base, which is coco coir, orchid bark, pumice, and horticultural charcoal, but just use significantly less orchid bark than I usually do. Okay, so let's move on to lighting. So this plant, up until this very point, has been living downstairs, close-ish to a south-facing window, but it has been kind of like turned away from the south-facing window, if that makes sense. So the south-facing window is more so behind it. So it hasn't really been in the best lighting condition. It did manage to put out this all white leaf, which I think is super cool, but a lot of the leaves, especially lately, are starting to slowly decrease in size. So I think this plant might get moved up here onto the plant shelf after I finish filming this video. For Hoyas, they like a lot of sun. Even direct sunlight is totally fine for Hoyas. A lot of people sun stress their Hoyas on purpose. If you sun stress your Hoyas, a lot of times it'll turn kind of like a reddish color. I'm not sure if for this plant that will turn a reddish color, but it will make the new growth more pink, and then slowly the new growth will fade down to, you know, the margins being white, or, you know, in the case where it does put out all white leaves like this, that'll fade down to being just white. So like I mentioned in my Hoya carnosa Krimson Princess video, the growth pattern of Hoyas is that they like to put out really long peduncles like this first before putting out new leaves. So this is just like the beginning of this leaf. Like this leaf is still pretty new and it still is likely going to get bigger and develop a little more. Okay, so let's talk about watering now. I let my Hoyas water, or I'm sorry. Okay, let's talk about watering now. So I let my Hoyas dry out completely, like the soil to dry out completely, but also for the leaves to use a lot of its stored water before I water it. So I've showed you this in the Hoya Krimson Princess video, but I would do the taco test, which is I take a leaf by the base of the plant. It has to be a leaf by the base of the plant. And I start to bend it, and if it bends all the way like this, I'll know that it likely needs water. You can also wait until the veins on this leaf become very prominent. I think that this specific plant, the veining is a little bit less prominent even when it is thirsty than say like the Hindu rope. That one, when it's thirsty, it is very, very easy to tell. So yeah, I would really like, this plant is very, very drought tolerant though, so I would err on the side of watering less versus watering more. So for humidity, these don't need any extra humidity at all. I have mine in ambient room humidity, which for me is around 50%, but I feel like even if you have lower humidity than that, this Hoya will likely still do just fine. A lot of people have Hoyas like this up on like a trellis. I don't really think that that gives you bigger leaves, like how with aeroids a lot of times if you stake them up or put them on a totem it gets you bigger leaves. I don't really think that happens necessarily with Hoyas, but it does look really good, and I think it gives the plant a little bit of support so that the plant stops just putting out so many peduncles and actually starts producing leaves. So I think that if you look at the shape of this plant, like, don't you think it's so perfect for it to be trained up like one of those like circle trellises? I have some copper wiring from a previous, like, look at that, that looks so good. I have some copper wiring from a previous project of when I made the Bee's House of Plants sign, so I might try to DIY it and do my own kind of like circle trellis situation. If I do, I'll make sure to post about it on my Instagram, so follow me on there if you don't already. Okay, I think the last thing that we need to talk about is propagation. These propagate pretty much like any other Hoya. They propagate via a stem cutting. It's pretty easy to propagate these. I like to, because these propagate really well just from like anywhere of the stem, a lot of people like to propagate them via prop boxes. I do have a video called like my propagation setup. My propagation setup doesn't really look like that anymore, but you can kind of see like a visual of how prop boxes work in that video, so I'll link it here. So basically what you would do is you would just cut, you know, anywhere on the stem really, and then you can just lay the side, the entire side, down into a box. You know, depending on how many cuttings you want to do, you could do like a takeout box with either damp sphagnum moss or perlite in it. You can even use like coco coir, but I would prefer, personally for me, I would prefer damp sphagnum moss. So you could just lay it down on its side. If you're planning on doing like a ton of cuttings, you can even use like one of those like plastic storage boxes and just do a ton of cuttings. And how you would water any propagations in a prop box is that you would wait for it to get slightly dry, because remember you're putting the lid on it, so it does stay damp for much longer than, you know, just out in open air circulation. Then you just take like a spray bottle and just spray everything down. Prop boxes are definitely not my favorite method of propagating. They're really just not for me, just because I think that it lacks a lot of air circulation normally, so I tend to run into a lot of issues with rot when I use prop boxes. So for me, if I were to propagate this plant, I would probably just put it into like a cup or a nursery, like a nursery pot with some sphagnum moss. You can even put your cuttings into water. Like they'll probably root. So yeah. Okay, so I think that is all I had to tell you about this plant. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!